Hey everyone. For anyone who hasn't heard, fairly recently, Nicole Arbour made a video basically attacking people with ADHD and parents of people with ADHD and saying that they shouldn't drug their kids with ADHD, and it was pretty messed up. So I decided that I wanted to make a response video with some actual information that is not false, and pretty much just set the record straight. And before I start, I want to pretty much make it clear why I'm doing this video, because before I made it, I had a few people tell me that they don't think it's a good idea, that I should just ignore the negativity and stuff like that. And the reason I don't want to do that is because for me it's not possible to ignore the negativity, because this is my life. You know, I've been bullied by peers, I've been bullied by teachers, I've been bullied by people who were supposed to be like there for me about it. So this is normal for me. It makes it really hard to ignore the negativity that comes with it. So I wanted to make it clear why I'm doing this. And the reason I have my laptop in front of me is because I have oodles of actual sources and information that I'm going to keep, you know, in front of me. So yeah, so I pretty much just want to be taken seriously, and I don't want to be silenced on this, because this is a very real thing for me. And I also realized that there were way too many people that agreed with her, and I just found that absolutely ridiculous. So this is what I wanted to respond to as to what she said. The first thing that caught my eye was that she said,
America is the most drugged up country in the world.
We're also the third most populated country in the world. And it's also, I think it's important to point out that not every country has the means to get necessary medications. And that's not to say that there's never been like unnecessary medications prescribed, but I really don't think that you get to decide whether or not like I'm one of them, because like that, I just don't think that you can just look at someone and decide that. Most medications that are prescribed are necessary. That's just simple fact. The next thing that caught my attention was
ADD and ADHD are not real things.
I have so many comments about this. First of all, I really could just end this argument by saying, let's go to lunch and you'll see it exists. Really, if you've had a conversation with me, you'll know that I have it. It's pretty obvious. And really, if we did that, you'd probably just say like, oh, sorry, my bad, you were right, and that would probably be the end of it. But since we know that's not going to happen, I'll continue to make my point. I have severe ADHD. I lack attention to detail. I have trouble focusing. I am easily distracted. I have a hard time finishing work on time, and I have a very hard time with organization and time management. I struggle with initiation. I avoid tasks that require me to do things that I struggle with due to ADHD. I often lose things or forget things. I am very forgetful. I am almost always late. I'm very fidgety. I am constantly on the go. I am chatty. I interrupt more than I should. And I am pretty easily frustrated. And just, I would like to make something clear. In order to be diagnosed with ADHD, one must have at least 6 persistent symptoms. Now, let me make this clear. Someone who has ADHD isn't someone who just tends to be flaky here or there, or tends to be really outgoing, or really talkative, or tends to be a little forgetful. Basically, these are things that I deal with every single day. I'm not one of these things once in a while. I am these things every single day. And it significantly impacts the lives of people who have ADHD. You know, so, and also before I go on, I would like to point out one little mistake that was made. And I'm not saying that this was a stupid mistake, because I know people who still make this mistake, but it was enough for me to say that your information is not up to date. ADD is no longer an official medical term. I use them both interchangeably just because, you know, sometimes I just want to, but they are not different. It's all considered ADHD. ADHD is now a spectrum with 3 types: inattentive, hyperactive, and combination. So I'm not saying anyone's stupid for saying that or not knowing that, but it was enough for me to say, okay, Nicole, your information is not 100% up to date. That change was made back in the year 2000. It's been quite a while. So yeah.
Kids are hyper.
Yeah, we know.
It's like banging someone the first time, right? This is fun. I'm totally never gonna get sick of doing this with you the same way. That's how it works, right?
I really don't want to know what some of these parents are feeling when you just compare their hyperactive children to banging someone for the first time. I know for me, I would have been really angry. I don't have kids, but I would have been really angry if I found out you said something like that about one of my little cousins or like my niece or something like that. That would have really bothered me. Parents don't take kindly to that sort of thing. So yeah, I really don't want to know what they're thinking, but my advice to you, just from a guess of what they're probably feeling, is don't say that about their hyperactive children.
Oh, your child has ADHD? That must be so hard for you.
Yeah, it can be really hard for them for many reasons, partly because people with ADHD tend to struggle and parents feel for their kids. Partly because parents often end up having to be the ones who work with their kids to overcome the challenges in a world that frankly wasn't built for them. Partly because a neurotypical parent really might have a hard time trying to understand their child and have to do extensive research because their child is going through things that they didn't go through. Partly because they tend to struggle in school, and it's a lot harder for them. Partly because there's actually a saying in the ADHD community, ADHD rarely travels alone, which basically means they're more likely to have other things. I have a list here. We are more likely to have anxiety, we are more likely to have depression, we are more likely to have bipolar, ODD, borderline personality disorder, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, and to fall somewhere on the autism spectrum. Not to mention, there are some pretty alarming statistics about ADHD. We are more likely to develop an addiction. We are more likely to get divorced. We are more likely to self-harm. We are more likely, we have an earlier onset age of depression than someone who doesn't have it. Someone who doesn't have ADHD but has depression, their onset is more likely to be mid to late teens. For someone who has ADHD, it's typically somewhere around tweens, early teens. Let's see. We are more likely to attempt suicide, and girls with ADHD are more likely to develop eating disorders. I could go on. Like, there is so much, like, there are some pretty alarming statistics, and I don't think I have to explain the fact that parents worry for their kids. You know, I don't know about you, but my mom, you know, pretty much every time I left the house growing up, it was like, wear your seatbelt and please don't do drugs, and there was always a talk, like, don't talk to strangers. Parents worry for their kids, so when there are statistics saying that your kid is more likely to fall into a bad situation, yes, it can be hard because they worry. Okay, so needless to say that yes, it can be scary, it can be a lot of hard work for a parent, you know, and not to mention, sometimes parents of kids with ADHD have people on their case criticizing the way that they're handling it. Oh, and by the way, funny thing is, medication actually decreases the likelihood of this happening, so, you know, just thought I'd throw that out there. And you know, it's not all bad, because there are a lot of good things that come with ADHD that often make it worth it. Studies show that we tend to be more empathetic, intuitive, creative, compassionate, tend to deal with obstacles a lot better, we're adaptive, adventurous, you know, we tend to think more outside of the box. It actually is linked to higher IQs. We have a great sense of humor, and we are brainstormers, we are friendly, and we are resourceful. It is not all bad. There are a lot of good things that come with it. It's not, in most cases, I would say a lot of us don't say that it's like this awful thing we don't like. We do get angry, we do struggle, it does hurt sometimes, but there are a lot of good things that come with it. So no, it's not entirely bad. Let's see, you said
that you let them chase their Adderall with a giant frappuccino, Fruit Loops for breakfast, Oreos and Pepsi in their lunch with white bread, and because they're acting like a good little zombie, you're taking them to McDonald's for dinner and a sundae?
actually, my parents did not feed me poison. My mom was actually really big on not giving me too much sugar. In fact, I actually found out recently that my mom trained me to prefer the regular Cheerios instead of the Honey Nut Cheerios to lessen my sugar intake a little bit. So yeah, no, it's not all about that. In my family, McDonald's was an occasional treat, not an every night thing. Soda was kind of for special occasions, and my mom, like she really was not carefree about what she fed us at all. And I still have ADHD, so sorry to disappoint you. But granted, today that there is more access to information about specific diets, you know, internet is like an even bigger thing now, and you know, I'm not really all that old. Like, internet was a thing when I was growing up, but it was a much it wasn't as used as it is today, obviously. But no, I still have it, and pretty much the difference between me having a day where I didn't eat very well and someone else having a day where they didn't eat really well is a day where I skip a good protein-filled breakfast with a vitamin. That's gonna be a really bad day for me. I'm talking like constant forgetfulness, not focusing, forgetting appointments that I set. Like, it's running late for work. It's gonna be a bad day. As opposed where if I did eat a good breakfast, it's not gonna be awful. You know, I can pretty much maintain things to an extent. You know, I won't be horribly late. I won't be I typically will remember the appointment that I had made, stuff like that. Someone who doesn't have it and didn't have a great breakfast, it would be wrong for me to say that they're gonna act the same, but they're not gonna act quite as bad as I do. Pretty much, I would say someone who, if I have a good protein-filled breakfast or something like that, I'm gonna be equivalent to someone having a slightly below average day. As opposed, like, you know, if someone didn't have their good breakfast, they're not going to be horrible, like things that you're noticing. They might have a little, you know, glitch here and there throughout their day, but it's not going to be like this awful thing, which for me, I'm gonna be a mess if I don't have a good breakfast. So there is a pretty major difference.
You're feeding them poison and then drugging them for acting like they're poisoned.
Like I said, I was not poisoned. However, according to your definition, I tend to act like I'm poisoned, which I really do not appreciate. And no, I'm not acting like I'm poisoned. I'm acting like someone who has ADHD, and that I have a certain part of my brain that is underdeveloped. And that part of the brain controls, you know, attention, reaction to emotions, other executive functions. So no, I'm acting like I have ADHD, which I do. And I think that, you know, I just think that's pretty messed up that you would say something like that I'm acting like I'm poisoned, because I actually do, I do try to make an effort to at least have like some protein or something healthy in the morning. So I thought that was pretty messed up.
The new versions of Ritalin and Adderall are equivalent to speed.
No, they are not equivalent to speed. Adderall is a combination of amphetamine and dextroamphetamine. Speed is methamphetamine. They are both amphetamines. They can actually both be addictive. There are some similar side effects in there. However, methamphetamines are way stronger than amphetamines. Speed is a lot more potent than Adderall. It has stronger side effects. It is more addictive than Adderall. But they are not equivalent. They are similar in some ways, but they are not equivalent. Ritalin is not at all like speed. Ritalin is, no, I don't even know how to pronounce it. It's methylphenidate. Unless you mean that it is also a stimulant, which yes, that's true. It is also a stimulant. It can potentially be addictive, but the same can be said for any medications. But again, it is not as potent, not as addictive, and therefore no, it is not equivalent. I will hand it to you that yes, these are probably some of the strongest medications used for ADHD. Many doctors that I know of, they typically try the less strong versions, like the less strong medications. I know a lot of doctors typically recommend Strattera first, or even Vyvanse first. On top of that, doctors they're supposed to start you on the lowest dose and work your way up until you find something appropriate for the individual. Otherwise, it's going to have a pretty harsh side effect, yes. And I also want to point out that different people react differently to different medications and different dosages, because we all have different brains, we all have different bodies, and it is a spectrum disorder. And different methods work for different peoples. You know, you can have someone like me who has ADHD on a rather severe level. I actually have only tried Strattera and Vyvanse. Neither worked out for me. We're still in discussion on options. I personally don't feel like medication, or at least stimulant medication, is the best route for me, because for me it wasn't that great. However, you could have someone like my friend, for example, who I think he has a less severe version of ADHD, and he takes Adderall and it works fine for him. You know, I'm pretty sensitive to this kind of thing, but he isn't. So yeah, it can be like, it's pretty like, you know, everyone reacts differently. So, you know, you gotta kind of like just realize that, like you said, genetically there are different people. Not that we owe you any explanation, Nicole, but yeah, I just felt like I should point that out. You know, not everyone likes to talk about their specific situation because everyone handles it differently, and you don't know why they're handling it the way you are. So, you pointed out that Albert Einstein had an ADHD issue too, and Bruce Lee.
But Albert Einstein had an ADD type issue too, and Bruce Lee.
It is believed so, yes. And guess what? It benefited them, clearly, so I guess that's good for them.
Don't want to have kids, and they will be hyper. Don't fucking have kids.
Do you know a parent that said that they didn't want their kid because their hyperactivity? Because if you do know a parent that actually said that, then you're right, maybe they shouldn't have kids. But I'm pretty sure most of these parents don't feel that way. I really don't feel like they don't want their kid to be who they are. I ask most parents, I'm pretty sure that they want their kid the way they are. They love their kids. I know my parents love me the way I am. I'm pretty sure any parent like can find something that they love about their child, even in this situation. My parents love my bold personality. My parents love my resilience. To this day, my dad talks about how bad my terrible twos were, and that I gave him the funniest stories at work out of all the kids. I'm one of 4 kids. My mom credits me with making her a better teacher because she learned to work with someone who learns differently. However, some parents worry about their kids' hyperactivity being too strong. I have combination ADHD, which in your dated terms means I have both ADD and ADHD. I did used to get made fun, I got made fun of for my hyperactivity. I had a now ex-friend used to call me the flamingo because I couldn't keep my hands or legs still. You know, not every kid sits there and constantly kicks their legs no matter, and constantly like I used to, because I needed a way to let out my energy. My parents never felt like they didn't want me, and I highly doubt that a lot of these parents that you're talking to that have kids with ADHD feel that way, like they don't want their kids. My mom has actually even said she doesn't feel like my ADHD had this horrible negative impact on my life. She said, yeah, it was a struggle to get through, it was hard to learn to deal with, but she doesn't feel like it was this that awful time when I found out my child had ADD, because that's what she used to call it. It was never like that. It's just you learn to deal with it, it's fine, but a lot of parents do get worried because they're afraid that some bad thing might happen to their child. Obviously I scared my parents when I ran out in front of the cars. It happens. And that's not something every parent has to deal with. It's not. Like I said, I wasn't allowed to cross the street the same age as everyone else was. You know, it took a while because my parents were so afraid that, you know, I would get hit by a car or something bad would happen, you know?
Yeah, I haven't had kids yet because I still can't take care of my damn self. But I know that.
Okay, my parents took care of me just fine. They actually, like, I wasn't born into, like, a bad situation or like that. My parents were a happily married couple who already had 2 kids by the time I came along. I was a planned child, like, I wasn't a surprise. So, not that that's any of your business, but we did all right, and they did all right without medication because I was not medicated growing up. I didn't even try medication until my 20s, and I thought that was right for our situation, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. You know, I still struggled with all these symptoms of ADHD. You know, that doesn't mean it's not a thing. So good parenting was a factor in me doing well, and it did help me to cope, and, you know, it eased the stress, but it didn't stop my teachers with getting upset with me, and it didn't cure me. Not that I would want a cure at all. But ADHD is not caused by bad parenting. There is still research being done, but as of right now, we know there are links to genetics, and there are possible links to premature births, which would make it would make sense because it is a neurodevelopmental disorder, and, you know, when you're premature, you were supposed to be still developing, so that is possible. I wasn't premature, but, you know, it's not, you know, it's not a crazy idea that might be a thing.
Talk about kids when you don't have kids yet, and people look at you like you picked up their drink at Starbucks.
Not even that. People look at you funny when you talk about something that you don't understand. You know, if you were like a teacher, or if you were like a psychologist, I feel like you might have some ground to stand on, but you don't, because really what you're going off of is a biased Google search, and probably a very old one at that, because, like I said, your information seems to be very dated. But yes, I do think that they have room to be upset. You also went on a whole tangent about how Michael Phelps was on medication.
There was this other kid who was on ADD drugs for, I think, 2 years, then went to his mom and was like, "This doesn't make me feel right. Is the death stare really necessary? I thought it was my basic way bitch drink." Took him off the drugs. Mom put him in swimming. Okay, calm your twat. I didn't lick my hand and finger fuck your drink. I just picked it up and oh, that's not my name, and I put it back down. SMH. You might have heard of him. Olympic record-setting Michael Phelps.
Decided he didn't like it and then was put in swimming and turned out okay. That is correct. Michael Phelps did try medication for ADHD and he didn't like it, much like myself. And Michael Phelps still has ADHD. He still talks about it. He still advocates for it. He simply decided that medication wasn't for him, which is fine because different strokes for different folks. You know, like I said, it is a spectrum disorder and people deal with so many different symptoms, and because they are individual people, those symptoms affect them in so many different ways. So medication isn't for everyone, but in a lot of cases it really does help them, and if they don't react harshly to it, which is often the case, what's the problem?
Those same people are perfectly fine drugging their kids for acting like kids. Same parents that are so against spanking.
Funny thing is, my parents were not against spanking, so no, that doesn't make ADHD go away. Not that they spanked me ever for having it. That was not the case, but no, they were not against spanking. But punishing someone for ADHD is pretty useless. My parents did try it a few times. They, you know, there were groundings if I didn't get my homework finished on time, that ended up not working, and eventually we realized that. They tried sending me to bed at 8 o'clock, and I was making excuses to come downstairs at 11 o'clock. There are laws saying that schools actually can't punish someone for ADHD. It is discrimination. You can't do that. But pretty much anytime someone did try to punish me for it in school, all it really did was make me self-conscious. It made me feel like crap. It made me feel like I was incapable. So it really doesn't help. What helps is trying to help the person find skills that benefit them. That's really what helps them. And it's not easy. And sometimes medication helps. It depends on the situation, but no, it doesn't mean ADHD doesn't exist. You know, it has nothing to do with bad parenting or lack of discipline, because my parents were actually, I would say, more on the strict side. So no, it doesn't have anything to do with that. And again, you say,
ADD is not a thing.
yes, it is, and there is plenty of evidence to prove you wrong.
Because I was placed on psychotropic drugs.
Like I said, different strokes for different folks. We all have different brains, we all have different bodies, we all react to things differently. It's kind of common sense. You know your body better than I do, so I'm not going to tell you that you should be on medication. However, that doesn't mean that someone else will react the same way to whatever you took. But, you know, like I said, for me, I didn't really like medication, or at least not stimulant medication. And then I have a friend who, he likes Adderall, he does well on it, and it's because we're different, you know, everyone reacts differently.
I think you're being super unfair to the parent, they're just listening to the doctors. Actually, a lot of the times, it's the parents pushing a diagnosis.
Yes, that's true, and why is that true? Because it's the parent that spends time with the kid, you know? I don't spend oodles and oodles of time with my doctor, you know, I see him like, you know, when I need to see him. My parents, on the other hand, like I grew up spending a lot of time with them, so I think it's kind of common sense. I really don't see how my doctor would find out that I had ADHD without pointing it out that there are some symptoms there. It's common sense.
He's hyper and can't focus at school. Yeah, he's a kid. That's how kids are.
Really? So the other 30 kids in my class were just faking it better than I was? Were they just like lucky every time like they had an answer ready if the teacher called on them, and I didn't have anything to say if the teacher called on me because I wasn't paying attention? Were they better at hiding their fidgeting? Like, were they just better at this? Because like, I'm looking back, I remember other kids not having these same problems. I was there, it was a thing, you know? So no, I really don't think it's a thing that every kid deals with, because there was a noticeable difference between me and the other kids in my class growing up.
But he's not getting good grades. Did you try helping him with his homework or getting him a tutor? No, that's the teacher's job. They get paid like $100 a pack of.
My parents actually did help me with my homework. There were nights where my mom sat with me for hours and hours from the time I got home from school until I went to bed. And I'm sad to say that I absorbed far less than what I should have in that time. Granted, I do think it probably would have been beneficial to get a tutor. I don't know why that didn't happen. They did, however, encourage me to go to Teachers for Help, which I did. And, you know, I do think that over the years I learned to be open when I need help, which is great. But no, it wasn't like my parents didn't help me. They actually spent, I would say, much more time than the average parents did helping me, and guess what? I still have ADHD.
Paid like $100 a pack of Girl Scout cookies and a couple Tic Tacs a year. I wouldn't really give a fuck either. Pay teachers more.
I agree, teachers should be paid more. My mom's a teacher. I come from a long line of teachers. Yes, they should be paid more. They are so important to our society, and they have the power to change people's lives, and that's so important. And paying them would improve our education system, but that will not change the prevalence of ADHD. That does not fix it, okay? It might help us to cope a little bit better, but no, it does not make it go away.
He has the attention deficit hyper disorder. WebMD told you that? Oh yeah. Awesome.
You do realize that even when a parent pushes a diagnosis, it has to go through the doctor. The doctor still needs to analyze the person. Granted, yes, there are people who don't have a clear understanding of what ADHD is or what it means, and that's why a lot of us have some issues with it, you know. For the record, for anyone who does not know this, those of us who have ADHD, we do get upset when you're running a little late and say, I swear I have ADHD. Like, that really just, it makes us, like, we're taken less seriously every time someone does that, so we actually really don't like that. I do think that's why we need to have a clear understanding of what it is and why it affects our lives. Please try to be a little bit more considerate when you talk about it, just everyone in general.
All the popular parents at school's kids have ADD, so mine needs to have it too. Fuck it, I make more money anyway.
Only about 10% of children with 10% of children have ADHD, which means 90% of them don't have it. But yeah, they all have it.
Be honest, friends. If you have no problem giving tiny little developing minds psychotropic drugs, chances are you're on drugs yourself.
No, sweetie, that's often not the case. because quite often parents see that their child is struggling and they want to help their child, and sometimes that does involve medication depending on what the situation is, depending on what's going on. There seems to be this recurring theme in your video that ADHD is a child's thing. I'm 22 and I still have it. It didn't go away whatsoever. Studies show that about 60% of children with ADHD will take it into adulthood, possibly even more than that. In case you didn't realize, that is the majority. So majority of us do take ADHD into adulthood. So that's not uncommon. So no, it is not just a child's thing.
Oh, I hear that. Here come the fuck you Nicole comments, because I'm right. Every time I'm right, I get a lot of fuck yous.
While you would be much deserving of it, no, you are not right. And if you had any up-to-date research about the topic, you would know that. And you know, it doesn't help you, like, you can't block out the correct information and then just decide you're right. That's not an intelligent way to go about it.
School shooters had a mental health issue. No, they had a drug issue.
I would much appreciate if you didn't compare me to someone who murders people, especially since that is not a symptom of ADHD. I've been officially diagnosed. I have seen the criteria for a diagnosis, and no, there is no symptom in there that says that I will shoot people. So, anyway.
You're killing creativity.
Again, it is a spectrum disorder. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but people with ADHD do tend to be more creative. Does that mean that medications hurt creativity? Well, it depends on the person. Some people have said that they felt that they were actually able to better focus on their creativity. Others have said, and this is a quote that I found, that's apparently pretty popular, that they felt like a horse with blinders on medication, and that they were just pulling forward. And they couldn't open up to any inspiration. It depends on the person. Coming from someone who has been medicated, that actually was not my issue. I didn't feel like it hurt my, I don't feel like it hurt my creativity at all. So it just depends on the person.
Yeah, here's how ADD came to be. Doctors who weren't actually considered doctors by other doctors because they couldn't prescribe anything got little man syndrome. So pharmaceutical companies came in and were like, we can help you be more respected. Let's create some disorders that only you can prescribe drugs for. And the head doctors with little man syndrome, well, little doctor syndrome, were like, yeah, because I'm a real doctor too. And that's what happened.
What actually happened was in 1902, a pediatrician named George Still found some children who, while intelligent, seemed to have, and I'm quoting, a defect in moral control. And they could not control their behavior the same way other children could. In 1936, FDA approved benzodrine, which Dr. Charles Bradley realized helped symptoms with what would later be known as ADHD. In 1955, the FDA approved Ritalin, which became even more probably the most popular method of the time of treating ADHD symptoms. In 1980, the APA recognized ADD and the less common subtype ADD with hyperactivity. And this was put in the third edition of the DSM, also known as the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, because the first edition didn't mention it at all. The second edition mentioned a hyperkinetic impulse disorder, but there was no official name for it. In 1987, DSM-3 was revised, and it was ADD with hyperactivity became ADHD. So at this point we had ADD and ADHD, which was later just changed to ADHD, as I said before, in DSM-4. Throughout the 1990s and the 2000s, there was a significant increase in diagnosis, and this probably had something to do with the diagnostic criteria being changed, and there was more ADHD awareness, obviously.
ADD and ADHD drugs have turned into a billion-dollar industry.
I'm not saying that there aren't doctors who overprescribe, because there are. They do exist, but that doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of people who benefit from them. Technically, if we're being honest, technically cancer research is a billion-dollar industry, but that doesn't mean that cancer doesn't exist. It doesn't mean chemotherapy and radiation doesn't help cancer patients, because obviously that money goes somewhere. It goes to a lot of different things. And cancer and ADHD obviously are two completely different things, but you know, the amount spent on these diagnoses and medications, it doesn't determine the reality of the diagnosis.
We're willing to risk kids' lives, possible addiction issues, and their livers.
I don't really know what you mean by risking their lives. Any medications do have potential risks. A couple of them can be addictive, but people with ADHD who take medication are actually at lower risk for developing an addiction. And liver issues occur in people who abuse these drugs, which, needless to say, it's less likely to happen if they're actually taking their medication. It can damage their liver also if they already had liver issues to begin with.
Fact! The godfather of ADD has said that ADD is not a thing.
Fact! That's not a fact. The godfather of ADD, the person you're referring to, is Dr. Leon Eisenberg, who said ADHD is a prime example of a fictitious disorder. It was actually rumored that he said that. What he actually said was ADHD is a prime example of a fabricated disorder. The genetic predisposition to ADHD is completely overrated. When he said that, he was not referring to his discovery being false. He was saying that he didn't expect it to be so popular. And if you actually read more from the interview, you will see that what he meant was that ADHD ended up being turned into a misused form, which, like, I don't know if you've ever met someone who, like, every time they get sick, logs on the internet and decides that they have this, like, life-threatening illness. I have met people like that. It does happen. But pretty much he said he thinks that people have been misusing the term, that people use it as an excuse, and they quote-unquote offer a sense of alleviation for personal responsibility among those diagnosed. He did believe that it was real. He just believed people were using it as an excuse to stop trying, or even trying to, misdiagnose themselves, or like self-diagnose. The mix-up happened when pretty much, because he was German, and the interview was done in German. So when the interview was translated to English, it was originally translated through a computer, and everyone who was reading it, like, freaked out. They're like, what? This was fake? And then a human translator came out and was like, no, let me actually correct this issue. This is what he actually said. So there was a mix-up. That whole issue is all over Snopes. It really isn't hard to find, because that's been everywhere. Like, you really have to do some pretty lazy research to not find that out.
Fact! No concrete physical evidence to prove that this is actually a thing.
Fact! Actually, yes, there is. And technically, a year ago, if you had said the same thing, you would have been correct. There was no evidence to disprove it, and pretty much earlier this year there was a brain imaging study, and it was conducted in an attempt to find the differences between the brain of someone with ADHD and a neurotypical brain. So there have been previous studies on this, but technically they said that there were not enough, like the sample size was too small. They did not have enough people. In this study there was, I believe, over 3,000. They said that as of this year they finally did a study where there was a big enough sample size. So what did they find exactly? And I'm going to quote from what they said. From the MRI scans, the team could assess overall brain volume as well as the size of 7 regions of the brain that previous studies have linked to ADHD. I don't know how to pronounce any of these areas of the brain, so I will skip that part. The results showed that the brains of participants with ADHD were smaller overall, and that the volumes of 5 of the 7 regions were also smaller. The researchers, they also took into account that whether the participants were taken or have ever taken medication to treat ADHD, such as Ritalin, but this appeared to have no effect on their findings. Dr. Martine Hoofman said that the results from the study confirm that people with ADHD have differences in their brain structure, and therefore suggest that ADHD is a disorder of the brain. We hope that this will help to reduce stigma that ADHD is just a label for difficult children or caused by poor parenting. This is definitely not the case, and we hope that this work will contribute to a better understanding of the disorder. I can also show you a picture, if you like, of the two brains. But yeah, pretty much as of February 2017, yes, there is evidence that it does exist. Just because I know that there are going to be some people who try to question my intelligence, because my brain is technically smaller. These are only specific regions of the brain. You know, there are different parts of your brain that are responsible for different things, and the other regions are just fine. So you don't have to worry about that, and this doesn't mean that I am unintelligent. In fact, like I said before, ADHD is actually linked often to higher IQs. There are other, mental disorders that technically are linked to underdeveloped areas of the brain. Bipolar, certain forms of depression, autism, technically are linked to smaller parts of the brain. It doesn't mean that they're unintelligent. It just means that a certain area of the brain responsible for a specific a specific thing isn't really developed correctly.
Chemical imbalance is an advertising buzzword.
No, it is not. Your body has chemicals in it, and sometimes the balance gets thrown off. Just like there's a possibility that your heart might not completely work correctly, or your lungs might not, your eyes or your ears. It's possible for something to not be completely working correctly in your brain. It's really simple science.
Fact! Hogwarts is just as real as ADD. Yeah, you were tricked. Like that stripper you banged one time, who called you a day later saying they're pregnant. The pharma companies are the strippers. They just want your money.
Fact, that is not a fact. Again, you have no evidence to back this up. None whatsoever. The first time I got diagnosed with ADHD, the psychologist told me, she actually started to throw ideas of medication out there, and I actually said I didn't want them, and she said, all right, that's fine. And we moved on, and we just worked for it. We worked through it, because at the time I didn't feel like I needed medication, and it didn't stop me from getting the diagnosis.
Actually solve kids acting up? Yes! Don't be a lazy parent who wrecks their kid's life because it's easier to have a zombie baby.
First of all, I wouldn't know if I necessarily would say that what I do is acting up. Yes, probably when I was really young, I would consider acting up, but I was a pretty nice kid. I was very friendly. I was the type of person who would go up to everyone and, say hi. I never screamed in class, but I did struggle, and there is a pretty big difference. Secondly, my parents are some of the hardest working people I know, and many hours of work were put in so that they can afford to give us the best, and also to just make sure I was doing okay academically. And they were worried about me. They worked very hard to make sure that I didn't get into a bad situation, especially a situation that was related to my ADHD symptoms. They were far from lazy parents, and I still have ADHD, but I can assure you that they did everything in their power to make sure that I had a decent life. So no, it's not about my parents wanting a zombie baby. They didn't even give me medication growing up, which, like I said, was good for my situation. Some parents choose different methods because their kids might be different.
Stop cutting funding to schools' phys ed and arts programs.
Many of us agree. I agree big time, but that doesn't mean that ADHD does not exist. It means that there are less ways to show off what we're good at, and of course that is a problem. And when someone has ADHD, in me, for example, if someone who has ADHD is super bad at chemistry, because I was really bad at chemistry, but loves theater and stuff like that, and writing, and it did really stink in some cases, or it would have stunk if I didn't get a chance to show off what I was good at, especially if I wasn't doing so well somewhere else. So yeah, it is going to show more, because when people with ADHD struggle, they tend to really struggle.
Kids need an outlet, you've taken it away, and expect them to know how to sit in a tiny fucking little chair and do this.
We also agree that that's a problem. However, here's the difference. Kids who have ADHD, kids who don't have ADHD are just going to be greatly inconvenienced by this. For someone like me, it is quite literally not possible. Again, that doesn't mean that ADHD doesn't exist.
Pay teachers more money.
We agree, but ADHD still exists, and a teacher getting a better salary is not going to change my brain genes. So sorry.
Let's make everybody learn the same way.
And I agree with that too. In fact, my whole platform for ADHD, for what I stand for, is someone's executive functioning skills are not more valuable than my love, my compassion, my empathy. But someone without ADHD, if they have to learn in a way that's not really comfortable for them, it's just going to like greatly inconvenience them. For me, it's not possible. You know, I'm not gonna do well. It's just, that's the end of it.
And that genetically, there's different types of people.
We know. And we have a severe difference. You know, how many people do you know that forget to eat for 3 days if they fall out of routine? Because I do that. How many people do you know who do assignments and then just flat out forget to turn them in? Because I have done that. How many people do you know who have forgotten to to fix something necessary needed on their car? Because I've done that, and I've gotten myself into a dangerous situation because of that. How many people do you know who will legit forget like certain bits of a conversation and just not like completely lose it, like lose the conversation? Because I've done that. Considering these are major differences, we need to take them seriously.
Be population of future entrepreneurs and creative people, so that the boring people like them.
I'm not going to lie. I was bullied throughout my life for having ADHD, and the very worst time I was bullied was when I was in college and my roommates decided that I had to be on medication, and they were manipulating me into believing that my existence was a burden. It was really, really bad. It was a horrible situation, and they tried to demand that I start getting on medication, and I knew my body wasn't going to, you know, take well to what they wanted me to do. Believe me, I am so aware that there are people like that who really just want people who have ADHD to be on medication so they'll like them, and I believe that is so wrong. And if you made a video about people being less judgmental of different people, I would have been so supportive of that, but that's not what this was. You made a video about people who made a different decision than what you did, and I know I don't want people judging me for my decision, and I would never judge someone for someone else's decision. I don't think that's fair. I have enough empathy and consideration knowing, because my situation was complicated when I decided to give medication a try, and I know what it's like to be in that position. So I just think it's so wrong to judge someone else's decision, because you don't know what they went through, and you don't know what it was that made them decide to try medication. So you really should leave them alone, because I've been there and it's awful.
If you didn't know and you were ignorant, that's okay. But once you know and you continue to drug your children unnecessarily, that's child abuse.
I would like to think that most parents would do a little research before putting them on anything. I also think that in many of these cases, parents know that if their children are not reacting well to the certain medication, they'll stop it. But if someone benefits from the medication and they don't have horrible side effects, I don't see what the problem is. If it's helping them, it's not child abuse. And really, it happens both ways. My mom got criticism for not medicating me. They told her that she wasn't doing anything, which is it's why I'm hoping that people will do what helps them and not do what they do based on other people's opinions. So I think that it was pretty safe to say that there was a lot of misinformation in your video, with a lot of insults, and I hope that you learned something today. And just because I know it might be brought up, I did see the live video that you put out on Facebook trying to explain yourself, saying that you had someone try to diagnose you with ADD, and you said that they did place you on medications, but then you pretty much went on to say that everyone else is wrong, and stuff like that. So let me just put it to you this way. ADHD is it's so complicated, and it's so complex, and it's not an issue that you can afford to judge people on unless you've done a significant amount of research, you've been through it, you understand it better than what you do now, because you clearly didn't understand what you were talking about here. And I'm not saying any of this because I am hurt or anything. I have more resilience than you would even know what to do with. But this is a serious problem that is important to me. I'm not just doing this for me. I'm doing this for all the tween girls with ADHD who have no control over their lives and are turning to eating disorders. I'm doing this for people who really don't have the information necessary to deal with it and are developing addictions. I'm doing this for the parents who are working so hard to make this work for their kids, and they have to deal with people like you who are criticizing them, because our community experiences so much hurt and so much struggle, and all you're doing is contributing to that, and I think that's so messed up. So that's why I'm making this video, because I'm not cool with you putting out misinformation and stereotypes. It's not cute, it's not cool. So please do yourself a favor and educate yourself, and I say this to both Nicole and everyone who supported this video. Please stop putting out information that is misleading people. Thank you.